Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, lordy, lordy. For this reason, I'm going to do a slightly simpler video this week where I focus on some things that I neglected to explain in full enough detail that should give you a slightly broader sense of the whole project. So let's get into some of these now. The first thing that I'll mention is that the wings and tail were printed in very much the same way as the rest of the body in terms of the orange elements, but you'll notice they're darker, and that's because they have a higher percentage of the Onyx Impact Pro resin, and as a result of having a higher percentage, they are stronger. You know, the feathers are somewhat thin, so to have a slightly more durable resin made a lot of sense here. The tail mechanism is one that I really liked, and I've included it in the new one, but I noticed when I scanned the body that the body wasn't terribly symmetrical, and this could have implications with this mechanism. So in software, I twisted the back half of the body in order to correct this symmetry issue. However, it wasn't quite right and the mechanism didn't seem to be working well enough. The oversight here was that Dabchick is supposed to be used on my hand, and one's hand is not the most symmetrical thing. Here's some musings that I had at the time around this subject. If you were to draw a hand or model a hand, you might think that these are simply hinges, your knuckles, and when they close, if I get it straight on there, that they just come straight down. But as you can see, there are slight snaggly angles. You know, you see how this one bends around. So all of these things require taking into account if you're going to create something that works so intrinsically with your hands. And that is where the 3D modeling approach on its own isn't really sufficient. You need to be able to create something, whether you print it or sculpt it, and test it as immediately as possible with your hands to see if it's ticking all the boxes with regard to the strength of your hands, with regards to proficient energy transfer. So this is why, for me, the scanning and modeling and printing, scanning, modeling, printing, this process works so well because it's a loop that keeps coming back to reality. You're able to test the theory over and over again. You can't get sucked too deeply into the computer-aided design side of things because you will lose. You'll drop a stitch somewhere and the thing won't work. Was I talking generally here? Maybe, but I do think it is true. I think you have to apply concepts to reality often and frequently enough, otherwise something false can become almost a guiding North Star that misguides you. And for me, this was holding on to this idea of symmetry as an overarching truth, but really, in this instance, it wasn't applicable. So I tweaked the design manually, and in truth, it probably ended up being something very similar to what I originally had, but an interesting lesson for me. So prior to that last problem, I had collaborated with Bobby Duke, and he did a wonderful job sort of shearing off the outside of the 3D print so I could add extra detail to Dabchick. I was happy with what he did and I actually gave him one of Dabchick's wings, one of the original ones, as a token of my appreciation.
Oh my gosh. Okay, good, okay. Right. There you go. Perfect.
However, the piece that Bobby had worked was too large to fit on my scanner. This was my fault, not his. So I ended up cutting that piece into 3 or 4 different segments, scanning them individually, and then reassembling them in the software. Even with the part cut off, it's still a real big boy, so fingers crossed.
We gotta throw off. Get back on there, you silly Billy!
And on the subject of the body segments, I made some changes to the upper one, most notably this kind of ruff around Dabchick's neck, almost like a kind of jester's collar, you know, which I thought was quite fitting. And that, I think, added a lot. It also did a lot to hide the seam because the upper and lower bodies clipped together, and I didn't want there to be a hard, straight, inorganic line there. I could say some things about the interior mechanisms too, because I skirted over that, but I think in a future episode, I might talk more about the resin that I used for it, so I'll save it for then. One second. Yeah. If you'd like to support my work, here is a link to my Patreon. All of the proceeds go towards getting Dabchick across the finish line and the various other projects that I'm doing. And maybe in this instance too, getting me some more ibuprofen because I am fresh out. Thank you very much.